Okay, so today we are going to talk about modules. So basically modules are like reusable functions in a programming language. Like for example, say you want to say in programming languages like Java or C# or any of the programming language. Say in test automation, let's take an example that you want to read the Excel file, and you want to read all the entire content of the Excel file, right? For that you create a function, and that function you call wherever you require. Similarly, in Terraform, if you want to create, say for example, an VPC, one of the resource, okay, now that VPC creation, it's a kind of some few steps there, right? You mention few things and then you get your VPC created. Or even EC2 instance, you want to create an EC2 instance, so you specify few things like AMI, availability zone, say key pair, so those things you specify and you get your EC2 instance created. Now these things you might require to create multiple times and even in multiple projects maybe, right? So instead of writing these things over and over again, what you can do is you can create a module, a reusable component. In Terraform, a reusable component is called module, and that module you can use. Then I'll show you an example. See, I have created here a Terraform project. Okay, in this, let's see this directory first, modules, and inside these modules I have two directories, instances and VPC. Okay, let's see the VPC. Just a minute, let me, yeah, this is instances, and let me see, this is instances. I'm not able to see the VPC file. Just a minute, let me just see those files. I do have it here. I don't know why I'm not able to see it. Just give me a second. Never mind, let me open this. Let me open the instances. So in the instance we have few variables which we require to set to create the EC2 instance. Okay, so the first variable is public key path. So this we had talked about yesterday, that whenever you will create an EC2 instance, and if you want to connect to that EC2 instance from your command prompt, from your CMD of your machine, then you need the authentication, right? And that SSH authentication which it uses, right? SSH authentication it uses to authenticate the user who is trying to connect to the EC2 instance. And SSH authentication always works on public private key pair. Public key always resides on EC2 instance, and private key always resides on the machine from where you are trying to connect to that EC2. Okay, and when you connect, so the private key is sent to the EC2 instance. EC2 instance tries to match the private key with the public key it has, and if the match is successful, then it authenticates the user. That is how SSH authentication works. So here we have defined one variable, public key path. Then description, you are defining some description for this variable so that we can understand what this variable is going to contain, and we are defining some default path. So this is where the public key is going to be present on EC2 instance. Then this is another variable, VPC ID. Okay, then yet another variable environment. Which environment? Let's say we have different environments like staging, testing, production, right? So environment, and this is AWS region. And then this variable is a map variable. Map variable is what? Like in Java we have a map or dictionary, we can say, wherein we store the data in the form of key value pair. So AMIs, we have stored AMIs in the type of map, and its values are stored as key value pair. So key is a region name is a key, and AMI available in that region is stored as a value to that key. So this is how key value pair, in this form we have stored the data in this. Then instance type is another variable where we have taken the default as T2 micro and public subnet. So these are few variables. Okay, we have
What's meant by VPC?
Okay, VPC is a virtual private network. Its own network. Its own network is called. I'll just explain you in a paint. Just a second. Okay, so VPC is a private network. So see, this is the whole network which has got all public and all the devices connected. Okay, public network it is. So public network is what anyone can connect to anyone. Okay, this is public network. Like your machine has got the public IP address, right? Your laptop. So we can connect to your laptop if we have got the required like authentication. Now what is VPC is, on Amazon they have a concept called VPC, which is a private network, virtual private network. So it's like a restricted network, right? And this virtual private network gets divided into subnets, means small networks. Further gets divided into small networks. Okay, and our EC2 instance, when we create, so we attach that EC2 instance a VPC, a virtual private network, we attach to it. So any other EC2 instance, like if I want to restrict that, my EC2 instance should only be connected within that VPC, within that virtual private network. No other should be able to connect to it. So I can have that kind of a restriction. Okay, so EC2 instances, basically, let's say this is an EC2 instance. So this EC2 instance is set to be created in a particular VPC. So other machines or other instances or other resources from the same VPC, they can connect to this EC2 instance. So here we have that VPC ID. Now I'll show you how can we use.
So VPC ID in the sense.
So whatever the VPC which would be created, that VPC's ID, like every resource on Amazon has got an ID, right? I'll show you. Just a moment. Yeah, see here. I'll show you every resource which we create. Okay, it gets one ID, right? Even your EC2 instance gets one ID, your security group also gets one ID, subnets also gets one ID. See, I'll show you now. So by default, when you create your account on AWS, you get a default VPC, default virtual private network you get by default. And then if you want to create your own VPCs, then you can create. See, now I'll show you now I don't have any EC2 instance running, but let me show you the VPC. Isolated cloud network it is. See here, this is a VPC and this is the ID of it, right? So that ID we are talking about. So if I want to connect my EC2 instance to this VPC, then I need to mention this VPC ID while creating my EC2 instance. Okay, clear now, Rameshri?
Yeah.
Right, now let's see this create instance file. Now this is a create instance. So first we are creating a resource called key pair. Yesterday also we saw this key pair, and we are giving some name to it. Key name, again you can give any name as a key name, and public key, the content of the public key. So we are saying file. So this function takes a path of a public key as an argument and returns its content as a return value. So where we will get the location of our public key. So we have defined one variable. If you see here, we have defined one variable, right? So this we have mentioned here. So then this will get the content of that file. Okay, and then we will have one resource created. Another resource, security group. Now this we are aware of, like what is security group, wherein we define the firewall rules, which incoming and outgoing traffic we should allow. So that is a security group. Okay, so we are creating one security group to be attached to our EC2 instance. Okay, AWS security group, and we are giving it a name as allow-ssh. This is the name. Now this VPC ID is the the property for this security group, and we are defining it as a var.vpc ID. So we have one more variable, var.vpc ID. See here, I'll show you, there is one VPC underscore ID variable. Okay, it will get its value from here. Then we are defining one name. So we are giving a name as allow-ssh, and to which we are concatenating var.environment. var.environment. So this environment will have the values as production, testing, staging, and all that. Then we are defining a description. Egress. Egress is what? Egress meaning outbound rule. If you see any security group for that matter, if I can show you the security group, I need to see if I have any security groups. I have. See, when we define a security group, let's take an example of this security group. We have two things here: inbound rules and outbound rules. Outbound rule is what kind of traffic is allowed to go out from the particular instance, is outbound. Inbound is what kind of traffic is allowed to come in, is called inbound, right? So here, while creating this security group, we are defining egress. Egress is outbound rule. So outbound rule we are creating. From port is from what all ports a connection or traffic can be initiated. Okay, zero means all ports, because there is usually we don't put any restriction for outbound traffic. If you see here also, outbound, if you see, usually we don't specify any rule, or usually all the traffic is allowed to go out from a particular instance, because outbound traffic is not harmful usually. Inbound is something which we need to restrict, what kind of request you want to come in the instance, right? So for outbound egress, outbound we are putting from port as 0, that is all ports, to port as 0, that is traffic can go to any port. Protocol -1 meaning any protocol sending a request using any protocol is allowed. And CIDR block 000 means any IP address we can connect to from the particular instance. So egress is usually a open kind of a rule, no restrictions. Ingress, now if you see this ingress, so ingress is inbound rule. So this section is what ingress. So from port, so what are we creating this security group for? We are creating this security group to allow only SSH connection, because this EC2 instance, when it would be created, we want to connect to this EC2 instance from our CMD, from our command prompt, and that connection, SSH connection, always happens on port 22. 22 is the port for SSH connection. So we want the EC2 instance, the traffic on only 22 port we want to allow. Okay, so we are creating an ingress from port 22 to port 22, protocol TCP, and CIDR block 000. So this is what, that anyone can communicate to this EC2 instance, okay, but only on port 22. This is very important. If someone tries to connect to this EC2 instance on port 80, let's take an example, then he won't be able to connect, because only connections on this port 22 is allowed, not any other ports are open here, right? And then here we are defining an EC2, the actual EC2 resource. So you can take AMI. Usually we have defined the hard-coded AMI. So I'll show you a previous example. See here, EC2, create EC2 instance, and if you check out here, we have defined a hard-coded AMI here like this. But now what we are doing, we are based on the region you want to create your EC2 instance in, because every region they have got the AMIs. AMI is Amazon Machine Image. Okay, every region has got some kind of a list of AMIs which you can use. If you are creating your EC2 instance of particular region, then you can use the AMIs available for that region. Okay, that is how it is. So instead of defining a hard-coded, you can define a hard-coded AMI. But the problem is, if you are creating a reusable module, then anyone who wish to create the EC2 instance, that person will use this module, and he might require to create a EC2 instance in some other region, right? So you cannot be hard-coded here, because hard-coding will will compromise the reusability of a particular module. Similarly, in function also, when we design a reusable function, we don't be hard-coded anywhere. We always tend to get the data from the user as an argument, and based on that argument we we work on those function. We want that function to be working, right? Always this is the case. So we cannot be hard coded here in terms of AMI. So how are we accessing the AMI? We are using one function called lookup. Lookup is a function of Terraform which it's very simple. What it does is it takes a key and it returns a value against that key. Like in Java also, in dictionary we have a function called get. So to that get we send in the key and it returns us the value against that key from that dictionary. Similarly, this lookup accepts two arguments. One is the map, okay, or the dictionary wherein the data is stored, and another argument is the key, right? So you will send a region as a, because the data in the AMIs, if you check this out, the data in this AMI's map is stored in this format, key value format. So key is your region and the name of the AMI is value to that key. So this is how the data has been stored. So what we are doing, we are passing this variable as one of the argument to that lookup in which the data is stored, and we are passing the key as another argument. So what it will do, from this variable, that lookup function, from this variable, okay, it will return us the AMIs depending upon the key we mention, right, a region we mention. So that is how you will get the AMI here. Instead of hard coding, we are doing like this. Then instance type. So to get that instance type, we are using the instance type variable which we have here, instance type. So the value to the variable is going to come once someone will call this module or use this module. He would be providing values to all these variables. Then subnet ID. Then this element is the function. It's like a list. Okay, so you want a like in Java we have a list. So if you want a particular value from a particular index from that list, you use get function, and in that get function you mention the index value from which you want to get. So similarly, element is a function. So here you are mentioning the list variable, and then you are mentioning what index you want a value from this particular list. Okay, this is element. So you will get the subnet ID. Availability zone. So we are defining some variable. Security group. Correct. So security group we have just defined here. If you see, this is the security group we have defined just now. So that's what we are mentioning here. So AWS security group. So this is how the reference is done. AWS security group. So this is the reference. So we want to refer this particular resource there. This resource. How are we referencing? AWS security group dot allow-ssh dot ID. See, this is how the referencing has been done. So whatever the security group which would be created as a part of this resource, it would be attached to your EC2 instance, and the EC2 instance which would be created using this module can be connected to on port 22. This egress and ingress rules would be in picture. Key name. So we want this EC2 to be created with one key pair, and this key pair is again the resource which we have created as a part of this. So key pair. So how the referencing is, AWS key pair dot level up key dot key name. This is how the referencing has been done. You can check here, see AWS key pair dot level up key dot key underscore name. So the key pair which would be created as a part of this resource, that would be attached to the EC2 instance. And then we are defining a tags just to understand what is the name of the EC2 and the environment for which it is created. Again, these are getting the values from here. So this is how the reusable module is created. This is just the reusable module. Okay. Now, say you want to create your EC2 instance, own EC2 instance, and you want to just send in the required values. You don't want to write this code. Okay, this module someone has already created. And what you do usually with the function, someone creates the reusable function, you just call that function, send in the arguments, and you just get your job done, right? Similarly, this particular module has been created. What you will do is, see, I'll show you now how the module is used. This is how the module is defined. Now let's get into this directory, development. Okay, now in this, somehow I'm not able to see those files there, but that's weird, but okay, that's fine. See here, I want to use, so if you see the variables here, so there are only these two variables. Mainly the variable is environment. I want to create the EC2 instance for this environment, development, and this region. See, the region also could be different for you to create the EC2 instance. Okay, you will use that module and you will create the EC2 instance in this region. Okay, now let's see how it is achieved. Let's go to the main and just have a look at this section, this section, this section, this section. Just have a look at this. Okay, so we are creating a dev dash instance. Then what is the source of this? What is the source? Source is like I want to use what? I want to use this module which we just saw. This modules instances. See, modules instances. So this module we want to use, and we want to send these values to the EC, that particular module. So whatever the use, like these are the arguments I am sending. Okay, environment var.env. So what is this var.env? This environment which we just talked about, that I want to use that EC2 instance module to create my EC2 instance in development environment is what I am saying. And this var.env I am sending as a value to environment variable. So what is this environment variable? This environment variable is from this module here. See. So I can send my values to these variables. I am sending the values to this AWS region also. You can see AWS region, and I am sending my own value to it. My value is here. So I want to create my EC2 instance in this region. Then VPC ID and subnets. So these are also I am sending, right? So here, forget about this for now. Let's not make the things complicated here. Forget about this for now. Just concentrate on these three things, that we want to use the module we have defined. We are defining its path. Okay, then we are defining the environment we want to create our EC2 instance in, an AWS region, and that's pretty much of it. like you would be able to use your any module to create the EC2 instance. Similarly for VPC, let's understand the module of VPC. Okay, VPC. Now let me open the VPC file. I am just closing this for a second and let me open a modules. So we just saw this instances module. Let me see and get into this module now. So here again there are variables, AWS region and environment. These are the two variables. Whoever wants to create or use this VPC module, he would be sending the values for these two variables. So these are like parameters. Okay, in function we have the parameters. So here we have these variables defined to which you would be sending the values to create this to use this module. And this is the VPC. So you are creating a module, a level of VPC is the name. You are mentioning the source. This is the source from this source is from from Terraform registry. Terraform registry, I had mentioned about this Terraform registry. So Terraform registry is like Maven repository for Java. Terraform registry is the repository of Terraform modules, providers and all that. So when we are defining a module here, we are using a predefined module from Terraform registry. Okay, so this is the reusable module definition which is going on. Okay, its source is the Terraform's module and it has got few properties. Name, so we are defining the name of it. CIDR block, we are defining the CIDR block of it. Then availability zones, we are defining few private subnets, public subnets we are defining. So we are defining some kind of the variables here. Okay, and this we are using now, this module we are using to create our own VPC. So let's check that out. So how this module would be used. See here, I'll show you. Say in the development or maybe in the production or development, let's go in the development in this. So you will use that. So you are defining your own dev VPC module. Sources, meaning you are not writing the entire code again. Source is this module which we just understood, this one, level of VPC module, and we are just sending in the required arguments. So these are the values, okay, which are going to be sent to these variables, and accordingly with the help of these two variables a VPC would be created here, right? So VPC modules are nothing but reusable components. So you just define them and you use them by sending your user defined data. So you don't need to write the code. So here also dev instance, you want to create one instance. For that you are using a module which is already defined, sending in your user defined data, and you will get your EC2 instance created. Right, Rameshri? You there?
Yes, yes, ma'am.